The story started when the protagonist mumbled that if this was a dream, he wanted to wake up as there was actually a blizzard at the peak of this Dan mountain. He then introduced himself as Kanhana Jin and continued by saying that he was on an unknown mountain. Jin explained that as long as he could remember, his older sister had been the type of person who blamed others under the guise of justice. Some time before, Jin's sister asked him to come there quickly and told him that their aunt went to the trouble of giving them a lot to share and then asked him why wasn't he eating. He replied to her by saying that he didn't really like it. She then angrily blubbered to him that he was mean and continued by telling him that their aunt would be sad. He then asked his sister to eat it, but she stood there and gave him a side-eye. He remembered that this was what his sister was like, and the strange thing was that what their aunt gave them didn't even taste that good, and his sister said, "She'll be sad to make him eat it when she herself won't even eat it." He then exclaimed that his older sister was someone who guilt-trips people and let them do the work, and always used to utter that she was justice, and just like that she blamed people using her justice as a tool, and that was why he wanted to live without being involved with his older sister anymore. In the next frame, they were going somewhere in the car when his sister asked him if they weren't there yet. He annoyingly thought her to shut up and wondered how many times she was going to ask that and questioned if she couldn't do something about her laziness and asked her to have some more patience. Jin then uttered that ever since he got his license, his sister had been ordering him to fetch her or to bring her somewhere constantly. They then reached the fireworks display event where he opened the trunk of the car to get all the luggage. His sister, after coming out of the car, mumbled to her friends that that was tiring. Jin looked in the trunk and realized that there were bento drinks, but suddenly his sister called him and asked him which box had the sake as it was the heaviest one, and then she asked him to try lifting it up. Then her friend took the bento from Jin's hand, and then they all left, leaving him behind saying that they would be going first. He thought that there was still a ton of luggage left though, but then he mumbled that it was better to do it alone. He then encouraged himself by thinking that he already made it this far, and he had to do just a little bit more as he would be going to a university outside of the prefecture, and he would finally be free from his older sister. Then suddenly he heard a screech, and in the next moment he found himself in a forest. He confusedly wondered if this was the parking lot, but then he realized that the car was gone and there was complete silence. He then confusingly wondered if they were supposed to be camping out and questioned if he was dreaming. He then took his smartphone out and realized that its signal was out of range. He then calmed himself down and exclaimed that if he walked down, he would surely be able to see the city. After walking for some time, he reached a river and sat at its shore, stating that it was really a pretty river. He then again stood up and encouraged himself to go down a little bit more. After walking some more, he realized that he was near the sea and blubbered that even though he walked a lot, he didn't meet any mountain climbers, let alone a city, and then he wondered what was going on. His stomach then started growling as he was hungry. He then opened the box and saw that he had water, tea, coke, snacks, and bentos for 4 people and exclaimed that it was good that he had a cooler. He then sat down and started eating, and while eating, he realized that he hadn't seen any trash around for a while now, and then he wondered if there was a beach without plastic garbage nowadays. He then thought that he needed to prepare for spending the night soon, and then he noticed that this place was so wide, and then he questioned if he would be able to make it back in time, and then he guessed that he should just have to make use of the dead tree branches. After a while, he started cutting the woods with a cutter and thought that he was glad he bought a cutter for setting up their place to watch the fireworks, as through her older sister's tyranny, he was forced to go to a fireworks display, even though he was actually invited by his friend to go camping by a mountain stream, and he also regretted putting off watching the survival program for later, as it was something that he could use if he wanted to make his escape from his elder sister into reality. He then started grinding a stick on the leaves to start a fire, but his hands started feeling sore, and he couldn't muster enough strength, and then he thought that he should hurry as he had to make a fire before the sun went down. He then again grinding the stick, and noticed that smoke came out from the leaves, and then he blew air on the leaves and exclaimed that he should let the fire go. After the sunset, he laid down near the fire and stated that it was a good thing that he brought his jacket so he wouldn't get cold, and continued by saying that he was exhausted, and then he started sleeping. He thought it was okay, as surely when he would wake up, he would be out of this dream. Next day, he woke up in the forest again and realized that it was not a dream, and then he noticed that the fire was burning out, but then he put more wood in the fire, and it again started burning. He took a sigh of relief, mumbling that it was close. After some time, he again started walking and thought that he might be able to see the city if he went in the opposite direction from where he was going, and after this, he needed to gather dead tree branches again, and somehow he got bitten by the insects too. He then eventually came out of the forest and again saw a sea at the end of it, and then he realized that the land was surrounded by sea and therefore it was an island, and the reason why he couldn't see any more land was because he was at the other end of the island. And then he wondered if at this point, even if he get on the boat, where should he even go? He then disappointedly came on his knees and shouted if anybody else was there, but there was utter silence. He then stood up and started walking, thinking why was he experiencing something like this, as he just went along with his older sister and went to see the fireworks display that he didn't even wanted to watch, and then he mumbled that he still wouldn't be able to see the fireworks now anyway. He then stated that he had to pick up dead tree branches soon, and then he wondered why he kept thinking that he needed to gather them and realized that he needed it to keep the fire going. After a while, he stumbled upon a waterfall, and he stood there in awe, saying that it was beautiful, and continued by saying that there was actually such a place on this island, and then he noticed that it was the river's source. He then thought that this was where the water was gushing out from, and it was close to the riverbed, and then he guessed that he got lucky. He then prepared himself, saying that he should gather some branches and go home, as the smoke produced by the fire might be discovered by somebody else, and then he thought that he would probably be here for a long time, and then started cutting the branches, saying that he should probably prepare a house. He then began preparing the house and mumbled that he was worried about the house's strength, and then he wondered if he should increase the pillars, and continued by thinking that eventually he would fortify the walls with soil and stones. At night he sat and started eating food from his bento when he realized that this was the last bento he had, and now he needed to find food tomorrow. He then suddenly heard some rustling in the forest, and wondered if it was a beast's sensation, and then he thought that it was a rabbit or a wild boar, and then he exclaimed that he should hurry up and fortify the walls. He then laid down and blubbered that he wanted to take a bath. He then went to the waterfall and started catching fishes, and after he caught the fish, he stated that since it was peaceful and there were no other people, it was easier to catch the fish. He then took the fish back home and cooked it and started eating it, while thinking that this didn't had any taste, and exclaimed that he wanted some salt, and then he noticed that he also had to do something before he ran out of drinks, and then he wondered if he should drink spring water bit by bit until he gets used to it. He then went to sleep, encouraging himself by saying that he should do his best tomorrow to build more of the house tomorrow. Next day he started building the house, and after some work, he blubbered that he made a lot of progress as he covered the ceiling with twigs and leaves, and now it was kind of dark inside, and then he thought if he should make a window using some plastic bags. He then sat inside his house explaining that today he dug a drain and piled up stones as preventive measures for rain, when suddenly he noticed a ragged rock, and he realized that he knew what this was, but he needed to put it on an open fire to make it warm, as it could come in handy because it gets cold at night. Then he wondered if he should make it so he could take a bath, and after some time, he made a bath, saying that it was a little small, but this was enough for him. He then took that rock and put it on fire to make it hot, and then he took the hot rock and put it in the bath. He then realized that the rock was really hot, and he thought that the stones below were breaking, and from now on, he should be careful. He then sat inside the bath and started thinking that he was getting tired of grilled fish and crabs, and he also wanted to make something that looked like a pot, but then he noticed a leaf floating in the bath. He then remembered that the leaves were turning red on the mountain these days, and he was glad that he got to take a bath, but he thought that it was getting a little cold. He then mumbled that he did some pottery and became able to cook a few stewed dishes, and exclaimed that it was good to have knowledge, as it let him eat more kinds of food. After some days he proudly looked at his house and stated that there was still room for improvement, but it was a success. He then explained that before he knew it, snow had piled up on the top of the mountain, and while walking in the snow, Jin noticed some mushrooms and wondered if those were edible, but then he rejected this thought and realized that he should go. He then reached his house and put on the fire and sat down near it. He exclaimed that it was cold, and before long, it would start snowing here too, and it would be hard to catch a fish. He then wondered if he should make some dried fish and dried seaweed. He then continued by explaining that he was able to somehow manage himself till now, and then he questioned for how long would he be able to move. Then he started thinking if he was going to die here just like this, all alone. Suddenly a ball of light came in front of Jin and started saying that it was sorry as it didn't realize that he got involved in this. Jin wondered what was it? The ball of light answered him by saying that it got him involved while summoning a hero, and told him that this was not the world that he knew. After listening to it, he became shocked and confused at the same time. The ball of light told Jin that it got him involved while summoning a hero, and this was not the world that he knew. He then started wondering what hero summoning was and how he got involved, as it was confusing for him. He then suddenly asked the ball of light to return him to his previous life. The ball of light apologized to him, saying that it couldn't do that, and continued by saying that to begin with, he could only go in this world just before he died, but then it realized that it could still feel his lifespan from back there. Jin uttered to the ball of light that he didn't know what it was talking about, as it even said that this was not the world he was in, and then he angrily asked where the hell was he. The ball of light then informed him that this was a world with magic and swords, and then he started wondering who would have believed such a thing, and all the more when it was suddenly revealed to him, and he then remembered that on the mountain as well, he hadn't even seen any monsters, dungeons, or the like he would see in games. He then asked the ball of light if it was a spirit. The ball of light answered him by saying that it was not a spirit, as it used to be a god, but since it summoned a hero, its spiritual power as a god decreased significantly, because after summoning, its existence became unclear, but its power would come back eventually. It continued by telling him that it said all this about the hero, but the truth was that summoning any living thing was fine, as the purpose of summoning was to connect that world to this world for a moment. Jin stood there in utter confusion. The ball of light continued by explaining that in that instant the two worlds connected, and God's power was consumed in order for that world to escape destruction due to extreme materialization, as this world acquired living things from that world, which would save this world from extreme spiritualization. Jin thought that he couldn't understand anything. The ball continued saying that finally, the heroes that could be summoned here had limited qualifications, and the number of people that should be called were 3, and they were summoned just before they died, and it didn't realize immediately that he got caught up with Haruka and others. Jin then became shocked and asked the ball if Haruka, his older sister, was the hero. It replied to him by saying that he was right. He then started thinking that 3 people matched the number of people between his older sister and her friends, and then he wondered if he was supposed to die as well, but then he remembered that it said that he still had a remaining lifespan on the other side. He then suddenly heard a voice saying that he thought that his world was loud, and then he noticed that there were several gods standing in front of him, and he became extremely confused. The ball of light referred to one of the gods as Van. Jin just stood there. Van stated to the ball of light that it was too slow, and continued by saying that they should first listen to what his wish was first, then they would deal with this later. The ball of light worriedly asked Van to stop, as it was just an accident. Suddenly a puppy came there, and they all noticed it. The ball of light uttered that it was right that Richie failed and some power was left lingering around the passage, but it already told them that the spread was wider than usual, and that was not its fault. Jin confusedly thought that it was definitely its fault. Van angrily told the ball of light that he said they would discuss it later. Then another god went towards Jin and called him the person from the other world and asked him who would he choose. Van, while glaring towards the ball of light, said that since it was impossible to return him to the other world, they would let him choose a guardian deity in this world, as usually the summoned person was gifted protection, and told him that the remaining lifespan he would have had in that world would be bestowed to him as skills or as items that he would need in this world, and it could be physical ability, magic, fascination, gold, or anything that he desired. He then informed Jin that he was Van and his power was the fire attribute, where destruction and restoration were present. Another god introduced himself as Rudale and told him that his power was of earth and stillness magic. Another god told him that his name was Cadel, and he ruled over flora and order. Another god added that his name was Ish, and he oversaw water and healing. The old goddess informed Jin that she was Pal and she controlled land and harvest. A young goddess introduced herself as Mishto and exclaimed that she had the power of light and wind, as well as of romance and caprice. Another goddess uttered that her name was Halalfa, and she oversaw light, love, and beauty, and then she informed Jin that this puppy was Richie, whose power was now mostly gone. However, he controlled ice and darkness. However, he didn't have any more power to bestow on him. The ball of light then exclaimed that his power was on the verge of vanishing, and he was even brimming with confidence before. Jin annoyingly asked the ball of light to shut up. Jin then asked them if the powers could be overlapping. Van explained to him that in this world, right after birth, people vanish, and they were the only ones who were in here, but there were also other people that were powerful. Mishto barged in and uttered that it was actually rare to be a god until their power was already reasonable enough to be treated as such, and then they asked him who did he prefer. Jin gave it a thought and asked if he could choose all of them. Cadel then replied to him by saying that his lifespan in that world was insufficient to receive all of their powers, and continued by saying that it negates and weakens the divine protection that was given. He also added by saying that there was an exception if they compromised or were always close with each other, but they only occasionally saw each other, and he wouldn't get any advantage from it. Van then stated that the power received would manifest its nature based on the disposition of the god, and explained to Jin that if he bestowed strength in an individual, it would show immediately. However, if he gave magical powers to him, the latter power bestowed would get a different effect. Mishto then blubbered that it was the same as if she got fascinated with him, but then started to feel affection, and if she got bestowed by Pal, she would experience friendship, but if it was Halalfa, she would feel love or an obsession. Jin stood there and thought that he couldn't follow what everyone was saying. Cattle then advised him to think about what he wanted to do, and they would bestow him the necessary power for it. Jin then started thinking about what he wanted to do and replied that he wanted to be able to live comfortably, without any desire or restrictions, and without getting involved with his older sister, and continued by saying if he could also have a power where he could freely look around this world. Cadel then gave a thought about not having to do anything with his sister. The ball of light then interrupted by saying that Haruka was doing good as her sense of justice was strong, and that was why she chose her. Jin then thought that she used justice, which she spoke of as a tool. The ball of light uttered that when Haruka actively received them, she felt the power flow. Cadel then exclaimed that whenever they grant abilities or items, their powers as gods do go up. Jin then thought that they did a good vindication, and then suddenly realized that it meant that his older sister also received abilities, and then he asked them what the hell did they give her. The ball of light answered him by saying that they gave her domination and all magic abilities. He then annoyingly thought that now he definitely didn't want to get involved with her. Cattle then informed him that the powers that would be bestowed on him were magical ability, martial arts, production, healing, cooking, storage, transition, exploration, appraisal, mental fortitude, language, freedom, separation, and hero killing, and asked him if these were okay. Jin then started thinking that he said he didn't want any involvement with his sister, but then he wondered what the hero killing thing was. He replied to them by saying yes. Van then took out a sword and exclaimed that he would pass this to him, as this was something necessary if he wanted to live in this world. Jin took it and realized that it was a sword. Van informed him that this all-kill blade could cut almost anything, and then he took out a bag saying that this too was something that was going to be useful at the destination they would transfer him to. Jin took that bag and Van blubbered to him that this bag contained powder that aids in vegetation growth. Jin thanked him as he received so much. Cadel exclaimed to him that they were also grateful to him, as even though he was suddenly taken here, he didn't have any complaints. Jin then noticed Richie, the puppy, and asked Van if it was okay to take the puppy with him. Van answered him by saying that Richie's power and sight were almost gone, and that was why he couldn't bestow any power, and as a result, the only thing he could bestow on him was himself. He uttered that he didn't mind it and requested Richie to treat him well. Van then stated that the last thing that they would give him was where he would be transferred to his safe and comfortable house, and continued by saying that the abilities he'd had were compatible and should be a good addition to his disposition. Jin then closed his eyes thinking that he just wanted to live in peace and comfort, and then he got teleported in front of his new house with Richie. He opened his eyes and uttered amazingly with awe, as it was like beautiful scenery, and the temperature was also warm even though it was winter earlier. He then noticed his house and blubbered that this was more like a mansion than a house. He then looked at his face in the glass of the door and realized that it got changed, and then he thought that he knew he should get used to this world's appearances and attire, but they should have told him if they were going to change him too, and he should probably use those 3 youthful gods as reference. But if he see it in another way, he felt like he was already their son. He then entered his house and looked around it and excitedly uttered that it was spacious. He then went to a room and realized that this was the food storage that would never go out of stock even if he used it often. And then he looked at the ingredients and noticed that there were husked rice, Chinese cabbage, potatoes, tea leaves, miso, soy sauce, all kinds of koji, beef, pork, mutton, chicken, and it was like he was in a dream, and then he stumbled upon a tub where the fishes were placed. He noticed that there was a salmon and a Pacific sori swimming, and then he wondered if this water was connected to Japan because he always ate the things that were on that island, so he couldn't help but feel hungry when he saw these fishes. He then decided to eat, but then mumbled that before that, he should take a bath. He then went to the bathroom and took a bath and started thinking that this was happiness as it had been so long since he had a proper bath, and then he suddenly wondered how did he even polish rice? He then decided to see if he could immediately use the skill received from the gods. He then wore his clothes and used his skill appraisal. He then realized that he needed to open the water gate so that the water turbine underground would be able to move, and then he mumbled that this was amazing as he could actually understand how to use it, and in this way, he could polish the rice. He then gave some food to Richie and thought that Richie bestowed himself to him, and this was the only power and protection that he could give, and from now on, he should improve the power he received. Jin patted him and told him that when he would get better, he would give him meat to eat. Jin then started preparing food for himself and mumbled that sirloin steak and dried cabbage was a weird combination, but he really wanted to eat soon so he should leave it. He then noticed that he could smell a violent odor of fish and crabs in here. He then sat down to eat his food and first did the greetings. He then took a bite and happily blubbered that it was delicious, and it was already amazing with salt and pepper, flooded with gravy, eaten with freshly cooked rice, and the cabbage too was soft yet crunchy. He then finally realized that he actually survived. He then laid down on his bed and thought that he didn't need to worry about the fire going out anymore, nor he needed to be frightened of beasts coming, and now he was really going to live in this unknown world. After some time he uttered that it had been a while since he slept on a soft bed, so he couldn't fall asleep. Jin introduced himself saying that he had been here for weeks now, and he did nothing but eat, and time passed with just him idling around, and now to think about it, he also slept much, and thanks to the healing skill he received, his body felt healthy. However, he couldn't even get up and about as it might be an effect caused by rigorous life he had on the island. He then uttered that the abilities from the gods were full of amazing things and explained that through appraisal skill, he could make basic dishes based only on the main ingredients, and the skills were designed to be convenient in which he could make any recipe G knew with any ingredients, but his knowledge for food was limited, so he wanted to try various cuisines that could be found in this world. He then wondered if he should make ramen today, and then he thought that there were dried bonito flakes and kelp, but it was raw and he wanted it dried, although in the first place there was no wheat to mill. He then prepared his food and uttered that it still turned into a meal. He then mumbled that since he uses wheat a lot, he wanted to grind it quickly into flour, but he couldn't even store it since there were no containers or sacks. He then remembered that he received money and a map from the gods, and then he wondered if he should try going shopping. He then opened the map and started wondering where he should go, and then she started remembering the recommended place by gods, and then he found it on the map. He then used his transition magic to go to that place, wondering if he should have a look there. He then reached outside the frontier city, Canum. He then explained that Canum was close to the forest where monsters dwell, and naturally, adventurers tend to gather in places where monsters constantly appeared, and it seemed like this was a perfect place to earn gold and become stronger by defeating monsters. Jin then went towards the front gate where the guard asked him to show his identification and toll. Jin showed the guard his identification card and mumbled that his status right now was of an independent knight, but registering to the Adventurers Guild should make his visits in this city easier. He then entered the city where people started glancing at him, and he felt like he was standing out, and then he wondered if it was because of his brand new clothes or was it the appearance he got from the gods. He then decided to first buy some clothes as he shouldn't stand out this way. He then bought an overcoat and wore it and then decided to shop. He then started wandering around from one shop to another looking at different stuff and thought that the money of this world that he got from the gods should be almost the same amount as how much his big sister got, or probably a lot. While wandering, he suddenly noticed a bottle of potion and excitedly wondered if this was the potion commonly found in games. He then thought that he could probably make one by using his appraisal skill to know the materials needed for it. He then went forward and noticed a food stall and thought that he wanted to try this world's food, but the bacteria shown by the appraisal seemed dangerous. He then stumbled upon a farming shop where he noticed a fine grape trellis, and then he uttered that he actually needed some farming tools too. He then entered the shop and took some farming tools and told the shopkeeper that he wanted to get these tools. The shopkeeper complied with him. Jin then told her that he didn't need any change, but then he asked if he could get a twig from the grape trellis outside. The shopkeeper told him to take some with him as she didn't mind. He then thanked her and continued by asking her if she had some weapons. The shopkeeper informed him that she knew of a good store if he was looking for weaponry, and then she mumbled that he was not someone she see around her, and then asked him if he was a new adventurer, and told him that having a sword and armor were good for a start, and she recommended him to pick the leather armor, as using ones made with metal was dreadful in summer. Jin then thanked the shopkeeper and left her shop, and then reached the weapon shop. After entering the shop, he was amazed as if he was in a game. He then took a sword and thought that this was the first one that he had touched, but he wondered if this could be swung easily. He then blubbered that appraisal skill did help him to see various items, but he didn't know which sword was good. But then he decided to go with this sword, and then questioned if this weapon belt for the sword and knife was enough. Afterwards he bought an armor, which was a little expensive to have a fair amount of protection, and some leather items. He then entered an inn and exclaimed that it was tiring, and continued by exclaiming that it was a good thing that there was an inn nearby, since the gate closes when it was late in the night, and he could not use transition skill in the city, as it would be troublesome if he was seen. He then sat down on the bed and thought that he was in the inn, so he should probably be fine, although the bed felt awkward to lie on. He then mumbled that he should go home to drop off the things he bought, since he was also worried about Richie. He then decided to go back home, then be back again tomorrow to visit the guild. Next day, Jin went to the Adventurers Guild and told the receptionist that he wanted to register for the guild. The receptionist complied with him and asked him if she could know if he wished to pay the registration fee, or do a commission once without a reward, as he could choose freely, and asked him which would he choose. He instantly replied to her by saying that he would pay the fee. The receptionist understood him and requested him to wait for a moment while his adventurer's tag was being made. He then wondered if he could also ask one more thing. He then went towards the books and took out a record on the demon forest and realized that the monsters in that forest were possessed by animals' evil spirits, and it was the opposite of a sacred beast. He stated that this record gave information on the easiest places to go out from the forest, topography, ways to defeat monsters, and even how these items were used. Then a man called Jin from behind and asked him if he was the one who requested for an escort to study an adventurer's basics. He replied to him by saying yes, and continued by saying he wanted to learn the brief process, more or less, and he also wanted to ask for some advice regarding his abilities, as he didn't really know how strong he was. He then started thinking that it would be his first time to battle, so he asked for escorts to party with to serve as examples, and also for security, but then he wondered if one person would be okay. The man then informed him that his name was Dean and his rank was 2-starred silver, and it was compulsory for him to guide 5 of his juniors, and he would be his last one. Jin then uttered that he was a 2-starred silver ranker and was an instructor, but then he wondered if it was alright to be with only one person. Jin then became awkward and introduced himself as Jin and requested him to take care of him today, and then started thinking that he got too focused on him, that he introduced himself as Jin. Dean then blubbered that their names were kinda similar. Suddenly a girl came there and told Dean to wait a minute and asked him to at least not choose randomly. Dean asked the girl to shut up, as he already told her that he was done being another noble's companion, and asked her to stop ordering around him. Jin then started questioning if they gave favorable treatment to nobles' requests here, and uttered that this guilt seemed bothersome. He then mumbled to Dean that he wouldn't like to be involved in something troublesome. Dean assured him that he would settle it right away, and then went on to talk to the girl. Dean blubbered to the girl that tomorrow Chris would be back and that guy would gladly take on that request, and then he asked her if isn't someone with silver rank was fine. The girl answered him by saying that if requests were concentrated on Chris, then the nobles would only have been secured as their point of contact, and then the girl glanced at Jin while he stood there in confusion. Dean then exclaimed that he would never be their contact, as they should not rely too much on one adventurer and they should engage with the guild. The girl exclaimed that that was what she wanted to happen too, so she didn't want them fixing it. However, now they only had 2 people with silver rank here. She then turned towards Jin and asked him if he could at least cooperate a little. Jin then started wondering why she had been looking here since earlier and asked her if she wanted him to intervene. Then another lady came there and referred to the girl as Amel, while asking her to stop as she had been relying too much on her brother. Amel referred to the lady as Kana. Dean then thanked Kana. Kana stated to him that it was his fault for spoiling her, and he may have refused to educate his juniors, but he would have to choose from the list of the candidates that the guild had brought up. Kana then apologized to Jin for showing him something improper. Jin then realized that he was thinking that he was extremely familiar with what was happening, as these two were siblings, and when he heard about them being siblings, he felt a natural response of rejection. He then stated that it was okay, as he would now withdraw his request. Amel became happy and thanked him and asked him to just call out a party that looked promising instead. He uttered that this wasn't what he meant as now. He didn't need any escorts, and he would like to withdraw his request. Dean tried to stop him, but nothing happened. Kana apologized to him for the inconvenience they had caused, and the charge for his request would be duly returned. Jin told her that it was okay and asked her if he could take this adventurer's manual with him instead. She replied to him by saying yes. Jin then left the guild. While walking, he started thinking that every sister was a landmine, older or younger, and he wouldn't endure being in that kind of connection again in this world. Then out of nowhere Mishito came there and asked him if he was not going to use separation. He became shocked by seeing her. However, she asked him to be quiet and told him that the only one who could see her right now, and continued by telling him that talking to her through his consciousness was fine, and he should do the same when another spirit or guardian comes. He then asked her if she could hear what he was thinking. She answered him by saying yes, and continued by saying that she could hear only when he was consciously talking to him. He thought that that was a relief. Mishito teased him by saying that thinking about something naughty was fine. He replied by saying never, and then blubbered that using separation skill seemed like it would take effect without stopping, and he would not hesitate to use it to sever his connection with his older sister though. Mishito told him that he could use it whenever he wished, as they get stronger that way too, but expanding the target of separation too much would weaken its effectiveness. He then questioned if it weakened. She then explained to him by saying that if he used separation on one target, the people around that person would stop talking about him, and since he was trying to affect many people, the effectiveness would be lessened. Jin understood her. She then mumbled to him that he could use it however he liked, but not to forget this. He then thanked her for her advice. She smiled and disappeared from there. He then wondered if she actually took interest in him because he didn't use it even though he had that ability, or did she approach him to give some advice, or maybe it was half of each. He then mumbled that he had no escorts, but then he decided to still go to the demon forest. He then showed his adventurer card to the guard, and he allowed him to go. After reaching the demon forest, he uttered that according to the manual, a rabbit monster would appear right before the entrance of the forest, and the record in the library stated the importance of the horns on monsters. He then explained that the weak monsters were often called hornless, due to their horns being tiny, and with what he had equipped now, he could likely go against some without dying. He then thought that he didn't have any escorts anyway, and then wondered if he should try using that. He then summoned his all-kill blade, and stated that he could put in anything except creatures in his storage skill, so he hid the all-kill blade in it too. He then wondered how it worked, and suddenly a rabbit came there. Jin noticed it, but realized that it was just an ordinary rabbit. Suddenly a rabbit monster jumped towards him to attack him, but he dodged the attack. He then noticed that it was a hornless rabbit, as it had a tiny horn and blackened skin around the eyes. Jin then swung his all-kill blade and attacked the rabbit monster and defeated him. However, he became amazed as he defeated it in a single swing. He then went towards the defeated rabbit and put it in his bag, and then wondered what would happen if he used the sword that he bought from the shop. Suddenly another rabbit attacked him, but he defeated it with another sword. He then exclaimed that he still defeated it in a single swing, even with a normal sword, and it was a horned rabbit too. He then noticed the grass as it was beautiful and used appraisal skill to know that this was a medicinal herb that could be used as a potion ingredient, and he would keep it in his storage. He then again noticed raspberry and gooseberry gummies and uttered that unlike the mountain on that island, this forest seemed fun and was abundant, and furthermore, appraisal and storage were too handy. He then looked at the mushrooms and remembered that these were the ones that he saw on the island, and then he used appraisal and realized that he could actually eat them, and wished that he knew this at that time. Suddenly Jin felt a monster's presence, and it was not a rabbit, instead it was something bigger. He then turned around and became terrified, as it was actually a horned bear monster, which was a large monster. Jin then used his all-kill blade and defeated the horned bear monster in a single attack, and then looked at it thinking that it was so easily taken down. Suddenly Mishito appeared there and asked him if he was not going to use magic. He jolted with shock and annoyingly asked her not to just suddenly appear like that. She then apologized to him. He then told her that he forgot about using magic, as at this level, there was no need to use it just yet, but then he uttered that he wanted to try it out and asked her to look for a monster. She mumbled to him that there was no need to walk around to look for one, and then she advised him to try using the search skill. Jin then realized that she was right, as he was given so many abilities which he hadn't paid much attention to. He then used his exploration skill and found one horned rabbit monster, and then he thought that if he had used it right at the start, it would have been easier. Mishto then asked him to imagine what kind of magic he wanted to use and draw out the attributes he needed. He then wondered what attributes were. She explained to him that Van's fire, Rudiel's earth and stillness, Pal's land, Cattle's greenery and vegetation, Esh's water and healing, Halfurl's light, Richie's ice and darkness, and then her light and wind. All of these were attributes that he possesses. The horned rabbit monster dashed towards him to attack him. Jin then imagined and used the wind splash attack and defeated the monster. He became amazed as the attack actually appeared, and then he thanked Mishto for her help. She then told him that once she get to know them, the other spirits would lend him their power, too, and then uttered to him that the people who could use magic were rare and advised him to use it with care, and then she vanished from there. Jin then decided that he would go and sell these off to the guild, and once these were stowed, they would transport closer to the gate. He then looked at the defeated horned bear monster and wondered how he got this to the guild. He then reached the city and asked a shopkeeper if he could assess this monster for trade. The shopkeeper looked at the monster and became shocked and asked him if he came there in that state. Jin replied to him by saying yes. The shopkeeper then uttered to him that it didn't suit his face as it was amazing yet rough looking. Jin then started thinking that he thought it would be better than walking around with a sharply cut section exposed. However, there were a lot of dismembered monsters hanging in the shop. He then mumbled that this would be an unbearable sight in his precious world, but now he had mental fortitude, and then he wondered if it was because of mental fortitude that he was able to drain the blood from a rabbit and cut a bear in half, and when he was on the island, he was at his limit handling fish. The shopkeeper then asked him to put the bear there and then looked at it saying that this was great as all of its pelt could be used, and then he complimented Jin by saying that not only was he strong but he had skills too. The shopkeeper then informed him that this would fetch a higher price in the Adventurers Guild, and then asked him if he was okay selling it here in a trade guild. Jin answered him by saying that he was told the same at the counter. However, it was fine as those siblings were in the Adventurers Guild, and he didn't want to go anywhere near them. The shopkeeper then asked him to give him a quarter of an hour. Jin complied with him and then asked him if there was anywhere he could learn how to make potions. The shopkeeper replied to him by saying that for potions, the headquarters next door had recipes and the Doctor's Guild, although the magic potions were more likely to be with the alchemists, and continued by explaining him that those things were only handled by individual guilds or persons, but most of the knowledge they wanted to spread was generally entrusted to trade guilds. Jin then wondered if there was such a convenient system. He then informed the shopkeeper that he was going next door for a while and requested him to do the appraisal with the intent of selling everything. The shopkeeper complied with him. After a while, Jin got the potion recipes, and by looking at them he realized that there were all kinds of recipes, from imperial court dishes to baking a brick, and then he blubbered that the potion itself seemed easy enough to make. He then started thinking that because of the divine powers, he seemed to have physical abilities better than the average person, as he could heal his injuries with recovery magic and healing skill. But he wanted to make it look like he was using potions to heal himself, and then he decided to go and get some tools on his way back. The shopkeeper then called him and told him that there was a magic stone, and then continued by asking him if he wanted to check it out. Jin then remembered that he read about a magic stone in the guild book, and started explaining that a magic stone was seldom obtained from the corpses of monsters, as it was the reminder of its spirit that remained in the heart and got turned into an expensive gem. He then looked at the stone and realized that it was very small. However, he thought it would have been the size of a ping-pong ball. The shopkeeper then informed him that it was a red spinel and uttered to him that the redder the spinel, the more expensive it was, and then he congratulated him. Jin thanked the shopkeeper. The shopkeeper then asked him if this stone was also for trade, as with its size and color, this could be used by someone strong in fire magic. Jin replied to him by saying yes, as he didn't mind trading for it, as even if he didn't have it, he could use magic anyway, and then he left the shop. Jin then happily decided that he would now walk around and eat before the night falls. He then noticed some food stalls and became amazed and went over to them. He then noticed that a lot of bread offered. There were sauerkraut and sausage or ham and cheese sandwiches. He then used his appraisal skill and realized that a well-grilled one would be fine to eat, and then he asked the shopkeeper for one sausage. He then took a bite from it and wondered if it was a little greasy, and realized that since there were a lot of adventurers, calories seemed to be a priority. He then noticed some dried fruits and decided to buy them. He then ate one of them. However, it was sour, and then he thought that he could boil it with sugar and use it to make candy, and he could also use this in meat dishes. He then noticed a shop and wondered if that shop had brown sugar. He then went towards it to take a closer look and mumbled that they broke it off in clumps to sell it, and also the weighing scales here were nice and retro. Then he smelled something and wondered if it was sake, and he continued by thinking if it would be all right to drink alcohol, and then he wondered what the legal drinking age here was. He then excitedly thought that this was fun. Suddenly he noticed that many people were gathered in front of him, and then he went to take a peek and saw that there was a whole roast pig, and then he realized that it was sandwiched in bread. He then bought a sandwich and took a bite from it, and thought that this was it, and continued by thinking that the pork was fragrant on the outside and juicy on the inside, though the bread was disappointing. He then exclaimed that it was a whole roast, and it was sectioned per part in the pantry, and then he thought he would get a pig later. He then reached his home and told Richie that he was home. He then sat down and blubbered that he wanted to eat a lot more food, but maybe it was because of his stay on that island that made his stomach smaller. He then thought that today he was able to hunt monsters and make money, and he used up a bear's worth of potion tools. He then went towards Richie and used healing magic on him, thinking that Richie was not sick or injured and his existence itself was getting fainter, and he heard that healing did not work on him, but he was still using it on him, and he hoped he could get better soon and wished him good night. Next day he sat to eat food, and while eating thought that the cloth from Canaan was of such poor quality that he ended up not buying any, and since he had been given language skill, he wanted to read books from this world. Then he decided that he would go to the royal capital today. After a while he reached the royal capital and excitedly mumbled that it was huge. He then went towards the gate of the city and told the guard that it was his first time in the capital, and then he asked him if there was a guide map he could use or a person who could guide him. The guard then gave him a simple guide map and then told him that if he wanted to shop, the trade guild could show him around, and they might take him for a ride and have him buy all sorts of stuff, and continued by informing him that if he went straight ahead, he would see kids hanging out in the square, and told him to pay any of them a fee and they would guide him around, but it could be hit or miss. Jin understood him and thanked the guard and gave him some money, saying that this was the payment and he could keep the change. The guard then called him from behind and told him that beside the well in the square there should be a kid named Leon with ash blue hair, and advised him if he was there, then he could ask him. Jin then thanked him again. He then entered the city and thought that he came to the royal capital of the neighboring country in case something goes wrong, but it was surprisingly small and the buildings were all connected to each other. He then reached the square, and then he remembered what the guard told him about the kid named Leon in the square, and then he noticed a kid and wondered if that was him. He then went towards the boy and asked him if he was Leon. The boy angrily answered him by saying yes and asked him what was it with him. Jin then asked him if he could guide him around the city and thought that his face was scary. Jin then told him that the reason he inquired was because he heard from the guard that he did guided tours around the city. Leon then asked what about the guard. He then thought that something was off and then wondered if the guard tricked him. He then mumbled to him that he might have mistaken him. Leon blubbered to him by saying no, as this was also a sort of destiny, as he was free right now, so he would guide him around. Jin then thought that unlike how he looked, he was quite friendly. He then asked him if there was a must-see place here in the city. Leon answered him by saying that speaking of a must-see place there, that was the view from the top of the stronghold, and informed him that the citizens could not enter it. Jin then started wondering which one he should retort between he was a civilian but he had seen it, or don't suggest a place he couldn't enter. He then asked him if he had any recommendations for a clothing shop or a dining hall. Leon started thinking and exclaimed to him that they should eat quickly, and continued by exclaiming that he had an acquaintance who ran a clothing shop that was famous in its own way in the capital. Jin then started wondering why did he make such a scary face. They both then started walking while Jin asked Leon why were the walls of the houses here stuck close to each other. He replied to him by saying that besides the fact that the land within the city walls was limited, the width of the houses along the road was taxed, and sharing a wall to split the tax half and half was the norm. He then questioned him what else was taxed. He answered his question by telling him that there was the city tax, transit tax, and also glass tax. Jin then wondered what the glass tax was. Leon replied to him by saying that glass windows were luxury items, and in the private houses down here, they would hardly ever see them. Jin then remembered that he didn't even see a lot of glass windows in Canam City. He understood him and asked him what was that large building in the square. He told him that he was talking about the Bow of Spirits, and continued by explaining that akin to how spirits liked it, plants were grown in the inner courtyard, and it was a beautiful place with clean water running at all times. Jin then mumbled that they had faith in spirits here. Leon then stopped and apologized to him, saying that he should be showing him places like that. Jin told him that it was okay as he would pass by on his way home, and started thinking that he didn't seem to be a bad person, as it was just that he was not suited for guiding tours. Suddenly a butler came there and called Leon youngness. Leon turned around and referred to the butler as Note. Note then took a sigh of relief, saying that she was safe. Jin then wondered who was he referring to. He then noticed Note's clothes and wondered if he was a butler, and continued by thinking that he had a lot of questions, but then he wondered if he said youngness. Leon then apologized to Jin and told him that from his childhood, Note was the Alderhide family's butler. He annoyingly thought that that was not what he was most concerned about. Leon then asked Note what was it and why was he here. Note tried to say something when suddenly a voice came answering Leon's question that someone was after her. Everyone noticed that that was the voice of a lady telling her to get out of the city quickly, and also that all the arrangements had been made. Leon referred to the lady as Lilith, and Jin became shocked, saying that it was another person. Lilith then asked Leon to get inside the wagon for now. Leon then uttered to her that there was no reason for her to run away. Note then explained to her that this was a strategic retreat. Suddenly Lilith caught Leon and punched her in the stomach and said that it was her bad, but they didn't have time to dawdle. Note then told Lilith that she was hurt. Lilith then apologized to them and then angrily asked him why wasn't he using a potion. He replied to her by saying that now that Leon had left the Alderhide family, she could spend none of the family fortune. Jin stood there wondering just what was happening right now. Lilith then advised that they should move before there was an uproar. Jin then went towards Lilith and told her that he really didn't understand anything and asked her if they were wounded, and then he asked her if she was fine with it, then she could use this potion. He then explained that it was a potion made after that time, and although it was a trial product, he checked it with appraisal skill, so it should be fine. Lilith then asked him who was he. He answered her by saying that he was Jean and told her that Leon was showing him around the city. Note then informed them that they were on their way to Thane's shop. Lilith quickly grabbed his hand and pulled him inside the wagon, saying that she would take them there, and asked him to hop on. Note then gave the potion to Leon. Jin then wondered if the lotion worked, as he was a little uneasy about using it on another person without first trying it himself. Lilith thanked him, and then Note too showed him his gratitude. He told them that it was nothing and started thinking that he didn't care about the clothing shop anymore, so he wished that they would let him off. Leon then woke up and awkwardly asked them where was she. Note quickly replied to her by saying that they were inside the wagon. Leon then stated to Lilith that she was pretty sure that she was banished from the family, but she didn't remember doing anything that would make her a fugitive. Lilith blubbered to her that she knew she had always been honorable, but her younger brother, he was uneasy because she was still alive, and continued by saying that that sly little fox, not only did he unjustly banish her, but also made up another charge against her. Jin thought that they were talking about younger brothers or banishment, however he didn't get it, but it was about siblings again. But he wanted to avoid troublesome things and continued by thinking that why was someone who was injured in a family feud just taking their time to show him around the town. Note then advised Leon that they should retreat for now. Jin then again wondered if they were calling Leon youngness. They then reached the clothing shop, and the shop owner recognized Leon. Leon exclaimed to the shop owner that it had been a long time and referred to him as Tame and told him that she didn't have a lot of time, and then she asked him to assist Jin with clothes. The shop owner Thane complied with her order. Leon then apologized to him for the unfinished tour. Jin thought that this was not the time to apologize and asked her if it wasn't better to leave soon. She agreed with him and told Tame that she would leave it to him. Lilith then introduced herself to him, saying that she was from House Develland, and apologized to him for the late introduction. She then took out a ring and uttered to him that she would give him this, and told him that if he encountered any problem, he could come and look for her, and continued by saying that she was sure it was going to be bothersome around her too, so he should probably wanted to stay away from her for a while. Jin took the ring and asked her who was the young Ness. She answered her by saying that she was Leora, but he was calling her Leon. Lilith then informed him that Leon was actually a girl and her real name was Leora Alderhide. He became extremely shocked after knowing this. Lilith continued by saying that Leora was flat-chested, looked tough, and was stronger than most men by a long shot, and that was why a lot of folks thought that she was a man and called her Leon. She then pardoned herself and left the shop. Thame then went towards Jin and apologized to him for involving him in this affair and told him that they would prepare remuneration for the clothing, so they would only ask him to keep this quiet. Jin blubbered that he didn't have anyone to tell anyway, and then he noticed that this clothing shop did not have any clothes. Then a servant came towards him and requested him to allow her to take his measurements, and then she quickly asked her about the clothes and told him that they had these buttons. He then shockingly wondered if this wasn't a bespoke tailor shop. After some time, Jin exited the shop with clothes, mumbling that he was tired, and then sneaked around a corner to use magic. He then used his storage skill to keep his clothes and thought that exploration skill was quite handy since he could look for not-so-popular places, and he was able to buy sheets and bed covers from the fabric shop beside the clothing store, and then he decided to go to the bookstore next. However, his stomach started growling, and he murmured that he would eat something first. He then ate some food and then bought some books at the bookstore and then went to his home. After entering his home, he first used his healing skill on Richie, and then thought that now he should read the books that he bought. He then sat beside a window and started reading in the light of a candle, and noticed that it was already dark, and it would be hard to read with only the light from a candle. While reading, he wondered if he could make a lamp, but he didn't have alcohol for fuel. However, he had rapeseed oil, and then he thought that he needed glass if it was reflected on cleanly polished metal. But then he remembered what Lilith said about imagining what kind of magic he wanted to use, and then drew out the attributes needed, and then he tried using the light attribute and a ball of light appeared. Jin exclaimed that this was convenient and thought that today was a sudden flurry of activity. But he got a lot out of it. And then he thought about that scary young Miss Leora, and uttered that it seemed like she had her priorities a little skewed, but she was a good, understanding person, and he didn't know what happened to her after that, but he prayed for her safety. Jin called Richie, saying that they were heading back now, and then he explained that it had been a few months since Richie woke up, and at first, he found it hard to even walk, but now he had recovered considerably and even his fur looked better. He then mumbled that in these past few months, he inquired from a farmer and learned about raising livestock and making cheese, and he also moved to and from the country inside the forest and helped out with carpentry. Also, he was concerned about the smell of the medicinal herbs, so he planned to build more dispensary sheds as before winter came. He wanted to make it comfortable enough to stay indoors. He then decided that he should go on with gathering raw materials for the building expansion. After going outside, he remembered that he bought a cork oak seedling, and then he wondered if he should plant it. He then planted the tree and exclaimed that he would use the growth powder on it. After using the growth powder, the plant grew into a tree quickly, and he became amazed seeing it, and started thinking that he had used it on the grape trellis too, as it had got really amazing powers. He then touched the grown tree and wondered if this could be a great raw material. He then decided that he should go to the Canum city, and he also wanted to deliver the game that he had left in the storage. In the Canum city, while walking, he blubbered that getting a room every time he delivered goods was troublesome. However, he had been of two minds if he should rent a house in Canum. He then noticed a handkerchief lying on the ground, and noticed that Emil was standing in front of him. He then annoyingly thought that lately, the Pinkhead, the younger sister from those siblings, had been following him, and he seemed to have stood out since he unloaded a bear and potions wholesale on the trade guild. He then turned around and started moving away from her, thinking that being thought of as strange when he was seen purchasing home goods was a bother, since it was established that he was staying in an inn, and then he decided that he would rent a house. He then went to a broker who showed him properties and asked him about that property, as it was a new building, it was cheap, and it was also on the side of public safety. Jin then looked at the house and started explaining that in this world, it seemed that the old houses were better, as it was said that the previous homeowners would have made improvements so that it was more comfortable to live in. He opened the door and realized that the door had a lossy fitting, and there were even gaps in the walls, and this would have been unthinkable in Japan. He then told the broker that he had decided on this house and requested him to take care of it, while thinking that he had a house and also had transition ability, so before he could touch it up, he should help out there and obtain a bit of knowledge. He then started assisting in carpentry, cheese making, and plaster work, while he noticed that Emil was following him. After some time, he was walking in the town while thinking that it had gotten a bit colder when he heard Emil saying what should she do as she didn't have enough coins. He ignored her hand, kept on walking when she called him from behind, and asked him if he was possibly going to that demon forest, and informed him that the forest was dangerous when it's colder. He thanked her for her advice and uttered that he had already taken it into account. She then requested him not to push himself, as his life was more important than money. He annoyingly mumbled to her that he was not pushing himself and requested her not to worry about him. He then tried to avoid her and started walking when she tripped down and fell on the ground and looked at him with teary eyes. Jin then started wondering why wasn't she discouraged. He then went outside the gate of the city towards the demon forest when he realized that the older brother was standing in front of him this time. He pardoned himself and started walking beside him when Dean realized that he was from that time, and then he apologized to him and continued by saying that he knew that it coming from him was a bit too much. But then he asked him to show up in the Adventurers Guild as the higher-ups were scolding Kana. Jin then asked him why Kana was in trouble. Dean answered him by saying that it was because the higher-ups said that an excellent adventurer was taken by the trade guild. Jin then annoyingly told him that the actual cause was him and that sister of his. He replied back to him, saying that he knew it was his fault, and then he apologized to him. Jin then started thinking that the cause was certainly the pink bro, but that creepy words and deeds after that were on his pink-head sister. He then informed him that it was fine with him to drop by the Adventurers Guild, but he had one condition. Dean inquired about his condition. He answered him by asking him not to let his sister come near him, as when she saw him in the town he didn't want her to follow him, go around him, get in his sight or talk to him. Dean complied with his request, but asked him if that was okay as his sister was cute. Jin then creepily thought that his sister filter was amazing and realized that he had a sister complex. He told him that she felt creepy to him and she wasn't his type. Dean then asked him if Amel wasn't his type, then what kind of person is his type? He then started giving it a thought and mumbled that if he were to choose he would say someone who was the complete opposite of his sister. One with a no-makeup look and who didn't really scream girly, and then he remembered Leora. However, he rejected this thought as he was not looking for someone who looked male, and he took back what he said, and then he realized that he wanted someone who looked a bit feminine. Dean looked at him in confusion and stated to him that as an apology he wanted to show him a place where a rare plant grows, and then he asked him if he wanted to go there. After listening to him, he started wondering if the plant was herbal or edible as he was now interested, and he did have some plans to gather medicinal herbs today, so it should be okay for him to go with him, and he then replied to him by saying yes. Dean then happily complied with him. While looking at him, Jin thought that if he wasn't such a sister lover, he would be a normal person. Dean then showed him a plant and informed him that this was the kinka herb, and it was a ridiculous plant that was used to add fragrance to the alcohol that rich people drink. Jin then smelled it and blubbered that it was a bit grassy smelling or earthy smelling, and then wondered if it tasted good. He answered him by saying that he didn't know that and told him that he could get away with it with rich folks, and continued by asking if they should catch an adequate rabbit and make lunch out of it. Jin agreed with him while thinking that he couldn't use transition skills to go and have lunch today, and he couldn't even use storage too. They both then sat down to eat the food while Jin exclaimed to him that there were no futile moves when he fought, and it was educational. Dean then became flustered and told him that it was a little embarrassing, and then he asked him if he wasn't strong enough to hunt bears in succession. He then answered him by saying that he only relied on brute strength. Dean then stared at him and wondered about his brute strength. Jin annoyingly started thinking that he knew he didn't have muscles nor height, but now he was going to grow more. Suddenly Dean became alert and took a defensive position. However, it was Leora who came from behind the bushes. She apologized to them and asked them if she surprised them. Both of them became confused, and Jim realized that she was Leora, and he asked her what was she doing in a place like this. She replied to him by saying that she came here to hunt a bear and she was here to draw water. He then thought that that was not what he wanted to ask, but he couldn't say anything about her fugitive status with Dean here, and then he wondered if it would be bad to call her by name. Dean then asked him if they both knew each other. He answered him by saying yes. Leora then wrongly introduced herself as Ash to Dean, and Dean introduced himself back to her. Jin took a sigh of relief as he was right not to call her by name. She then apologized to Jin for that time and told him that she would surely pay him back for the potion. He told her that she didn't have to do that as he also made her show him around when she was wounded. She became flustered when Dean advised both of them that for now, they should eat. All three of them then sat and started eating, and Dean asked Leora that if she was able to hunt bears, then she should have enough to pay for the potion by now. She answered him by saying that the inn fees were a little steep as she was paying a gold coin a day. Jin became shocked listening to this while Dean asked her what kind of inn she was staying in. She informed him by saying that she was staying in the one with just a bed and a table. He then told her that she was being ripped off and asked her why hadn't she realized that yet. She replied to him by saying that it was introduced to her by a pink-haired receptionist at the guild. Jin then stared at Dean, saying that it was his pink-haired sister. Dean became flustered and blubbered to him that Emil was hard-working, and she didn't have any bad intentions and it was the inn's fault. Jin then mumbled to him that only his relationship with his sister was creepy and asked him why was it that when it came to his sister, logic didn't get through to him. Dean replied back by saying that she was doing her best so it wouldn't do for the people around her not to help her as she was cute. Leora then realized that the pink-haired girl was Dean's younger sister. Dean looked at her and became scared as she was making a scary face. Leora then told him that she didn't know if he would believe her or not, but there was a spirit beside her sister, and a mark received from the influence of that spirit was floating above Dean's head. Jin wondered what kind of mark as he couldn't see anything. Dean exclaimed that generally it was only strong spirits, but to see a mark was weird. Jin then noticed that a flower popped out of Dean's head, and he tried hard to not laugh, asking him not to look at him with a serious face. Dean looked at him with utter confusion. He then went towards his head and thought that it looked like an artificial flower and pardoned himself. He then snapped out the flower from his head, but Dean then suddenly became unconscious and fell on the ground. Leora then explained to him that it was a form of mental domination because the effect was suddenly cut off, and he just lost consciousness, and then she asked him that aside from seeing it, he was able to touch it too. He answered her by saying yes, saying that he could do it if he put his mind to it. He then started thinking that usually he could only see Richie so that it didn't really affect his daily life, and it seemed like that the spirits who were called gods could be seen if they decided to show themselves. Leora then informed him that he was the first she had met aside from her father. He then asked her if her bloodline was able to see them. She answered him by saying yes, and continued by saying that in the family, it was only her father and herself who could see them now, but they couldn't touch them, and then she advised him to be cautious as that ability would be coveted. Jin mumbled that he would take care and then asked her if for the time being, they should start silencing Dean. He then thought that if they leave him here, then a bear could come and kill him, but then he rejected this thought, saying that he should leave this as a joke and exclaimed that he didn't say anything so he didn't think he found out anything. He then asked Leora if she was okay with his ability to see being found out. She then uttered to him that she was saved by him and asked him if he was his friend. Jin answered her by saying no, as today was only the second time he had met him properly. Leora became shocked and stated that if they leave him here then a bear could eat him. Jin became amazed as their train of thought was the same. Leora then exclaimed that this was an error in her judgment and she would just resign herself to this situation. Jin then thought that she seemed like a person who would get the short end of the stick. She then asked him if he could see the spirits that followed her. He asked her to let him see and realized that she was being extremely pecked by a bird in her head. Jin then asked her if it didn't hurt. She replied to him by saying that there was an unbearable dull pain. He wondered if it was dull pain as it seemed like a sharp pecking to him. He then noticed that there was a band of light around the neck of the spirit bird, and it looked like a collar. He then used appraisal skill, and he learned that the spirit bird's name was Rue, and it was captured with the objective to make Leora more manly. He became shocked and wondered what was with this appraisal result. She then informed him that this was the spirit that her father attached to her when she was 7. He then thought that it had been so long now that the outcome was just dull pain. He then asked her what in the world was it for. She replied to him by saying that it was so she would become an outstanding successor. He became confused and asked her if didn't she had a younger brother. She answered him by saying that she heard that it was because her father was drunk and woke up next to a woman. Then it was sent over to them after some time. He then wondered if it wasn't a delivery service. Leora continued by telling him that luckily their country didn't differentiate between male or female successors as long as they were firstborn. However, her family has served in the military for generations and her father attached a spirit to her so that when she trained there wouldn't be a difference between genders. Jin told her that she was telling it in such a good light, but then asked her if it wasn't strange to be more manly, if they keep strength and stamina aside. She then asked him what about manly? He then thought that this person didn't even know the clear difference. He then pardoned himself for butting into her family affairs and told her that it was better to release that spirit as it looked like it was desperately pecking her. She looked at him seriously and exclaimed to him that it was originally meant to be released 2 years ago, but her father collapsed and then she asked if he could release this spirit. He thought that he could do something about that collar on the spirit and then replied to her that he could probably do that and asked her if they should give it a try when they get back to town. She agreed with him, saying that she would leave it to him and she wanted to show her gratitude, whatever the outcome was. He asked her not to do that as she didn't have any money, and then he asked her what about her lodging. She seriously answered him by saying that she would hunt bears. He then realized that he forgot that that was the reason she was here. After a while, Dean woke up and apologized to Leora and told her that it was because he spoiled his sister too much. She asked him not to do that. He was under the influence of an evil spirit, and it was no different from being led astray, and continued by telling him that in the guild, she saw that only men had the mark, and there was also a person with a single petal, but because he was with Amel the longest, he had more petals and was under a stronger influence. Jin then thought that a scene of men with flowers blooming on their heads was very disagreeable. He then apologized to Jin too. Jin uttered to him that there was no real reason to harm, so there was no need to worry about it. Dean then exclaimed that if people suddenly collapsed like how he did, the guild would be in chaos, so he would discuss it with Kana, and then would take Amel to the Bower of Spirits. Jin then started thinking that Leora was supposed to take him to the Bower of Spirits when they met, and then he realized that there was one in Canum too, and since he didn't know a lot about it, he would just keep mum. He then started thinking that after listening to their conversation, it seemed like each city had its own Bower of Spirits, though they differ in size, and it was a place to approach spirits, but it was also where they could be casted out. Dean then stood up and apologized to them, saying that he needed to go back to town now to lay the groundwork, and told Jin that if they were going to hunt bears, then he should use a conveyor. Jin then questioned what a conveyor was. Leora answered him by saying that a person who transported the game that an adventurer caught. He understood her. Dean then gave him a paper and informed him that he had already requested one for today and asked them to use that as the place and time were written down on this paper. Jin then thanked him. Dean then continued by saying that the fact that they could see and touch spirits, he would never blab about it, and he asked them to rest assured, and then he left them. Jin then thought that he knew that he could touch the mark of the spirit. After walking some time, Leora and Jin found themselves surrounded by monsters. However, they defeated all of them with their swordsmanship. Leora blubbered to him that his moves were fast and efficient. He thanked her for appreciation, but he should be saying that to her. He then explained that Leora was powerful and her clean and methodical use of the sword was powerful, and he only mimicked that martial arts skill and physical ability. After a while, the conveyors came there. However, they got scared seeing the number of monsters killed by Leora and Jin. They uttered to them that there was no way, and their cart was creaking from the weight of the monster, so they requested them to carry all the remaining monsters themselves. Jin then blubbered that they were not able to hunt any bears. Leora exclaimed to him that wolves had a lower price than bears, but if they had this many then it should be enough, and then she apologized for troubling him. He told her not to worry and asked her where she wanted to try it. She answered him by saying that she might lose consciousness longer than Dean, and then asked if they should go to the inn. He then questioned her back by asking what if she was unconscious for days, and continued by asking where was that butler of hers. She replied to him by telling him that he went off on his own and they were supposed to rendezvous in Canum, but he didn't know when he would arrive. Jin then realized that she got ripped off because he got his eyes off her. He then asked her if it was all right with her, then could she come to his house. They both then went to his house, and he welcomed her by telling her that she could sit over there. She looked at his house and told him that he had a good taste. He then started thinking that he was glad that he repaired his rental house in Canum. He then smelled himself and uttered that he smelled like a wild animal as he carried those wolves, and continued by saying that he would go and take a hot bath. She then asked him if she could also request one. He then told her that he would go and prepare the bath, so she should just wait here. He then went away and explained that a lot of bathhouses had steam baths, and there were also places where they had bathtubs, but when he did appraisal, he became apprehensive about the sanitary conditions, so they were out. While fetching water from a well, he wondered if he should use the washtub for laundry as he hadn't used it yet. He then prepared the hot bathtub and told Leora that the toilet was behind the last door and that he would be upstairs. She understood him and thanked him. While going upstairs, he thought that he should use this time and use transition skills to change his clothes, and he should also prepare a guest bed on the second floor, and he wanted a bathtub in this house too. After some time, Jin asked her if they should begin. Leora agreed with him and blubbered to him that she would be in his care. He then stared and noticed the bird spirit pecking on her head. He touched the bird and mumbled that it seemed like the little bird couldn't stop pecking on its own. Thanks for watching it, guys. Smash that subscribe button like it's your morning alarm clock.